So welcome everyone to Smart City Expo USA. We are so excited to have this conversation. Again, my name is Ken Ebie. I'm the founder and principal of Ebie Strategies. We are an economic development and capital access strategy firm. And I am very pleased and honored to be sitting next to a dear friend and a great leader, Gregg Bishop, who's the executive director of the Joe and Clara Tsai Foundation Social Justice Fund. Gregg, can you tell everyone a little bit about the fund?
Sure, thanks, Ken, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Ken is a great friend. We worked together during the de Blasio administration around issues of economic mobility, and the Social Justice Fund was started in 2020 by Clara Tsai, who's the owner, along with her husband, Joe Tsai, of the Brooklyn Nets and the world champion New York Liberty. The Social Justice Fund was created to specifically focus on economic mobility and racial justice in Brooklyn. It's a 10-year, $50 million commitment, and I have the awesome responsibility of figuring out how we make our investments in Brooklyn. And looking forward to talking about some of the programs that we do today.
Awesome, and I am as well. So in Brooklyn, as you said, that is definitely at the core of the work you're doing. And I can say it is tremendous work, very impactful. It has a very narrow and limited geographic jurisdiction. I'm sure that folks have come up to you from all over the city, right? Whenever they see you, he's not hard to find. How tall are you? 6?
Yeah, that's a 6'6". You know what I mean?
So it's Brooklyn, right? So can you tell us a little bit about how this highly focused nature of the geographic jurisdiction has actually enhanced your impact?
So I think one of the things when you think about $50 million and you think about New York City, we have like 8.2 million people, and there's so many different issues around the boroughs. You know this. In the Bronx, there's issues around economic mobility and small business support. In Brooklyn, in Manhattan, and Harlem especially, there are issues around affordability, et cetera. And so the reason why Clara focused on Brooklyn, not only because we have a major asset in Brooklyn, and this is a conversation around anchor institutions and the work anchor institutions can do to support community. We are one of the few teams, when you think about it, where you have the trifecta of ownership, make an investment in a community, the team, because there is a Nets and Liberty Foundation that makes investment in a community, and our players who make investments in community. Typically, you'll see ownership depend on the players to actually making those investments. So $50 million in a highly focused geographical area can be transformative. And what we do is we focus on different areas, especially in underserved neighborhoods in Brooklyn. When you look at New York City as a whole, you could say like the city has recovered from the pandemic. You can look at our unemployment rate. But when you dive deeper, one layer down, unemployment rate in neighborhoods like Bed-Stuy, East New York, Flatbush are still stubbornly high, and that's why we make those surgical investments. And so, for example, we focus a lot right after the pandemic on getting access and getting capital to businesses that were founded by individuals of color to ensure that they can actually be sustained. So we created a loan program called Brooklyn Accelerate. We tried to be disruptive and address systems. When you think about access to capital, for example, one of the challenges that individuals who are looking for capital have is that they don't have the collateral and they don't have a guarantor. And so our program, working with partners like the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce and True Fund, we decided we were not going to ask for that. And so businesses were able to borrow up to $100,000 without a guarantor or access to, collateral. We just wanted to make sure those businesses were viable. And I'm pleased to announce that, after 4 years in terms of doing the research, 4 out of the 5 businesses that actually we helped are still in business. So that explains why the strategy that we're using, we're very hyper-local, but we're also very strategic in terms of like the partners that we connect with and addressing the challenges.
Wow, so 80% of the businesses you've supported through that initiative are still in business.
Yeah, and it talks a lot about patient capital. A traditional bank probably would not make that investment. And one of the unique things about this investment is that typically a foundation would put their dollars in, and then the principal will be returned to the foundation for additional investment. We've left that principal with our partners, and so that money keeps on recirculating and will continue recirculating beyond the lifespan of the fund. And so I think that is where the transformation comes in, because now, for example, Brooklyn Chamber, prior to our involvement, their maximum loan size was about maybe $20,000. And because of our investment and because they were able to, actually, I think it's like 4x it, they now have funding from other banks and Treasury that they are now able to do loans at a much larger scale. So strengthening a CDFI that's focused on Brooklyn is one of the byproducts of that program as well.
That is awesome. That is a very unique approach to doing philanthropy. And we're talking about philanthropy transforming cities, right? So the president and CEO of the Kresge Foundation, Rip Rapson, has spoken about the need for the multiple sectors in civil society to collaborate for there to be effective and impactful and sustainable philanthropic activity, right? So can you speak to us a little bit about how the Social Justice Fund engages with stakeholders, whether it's local and state governments, the corporate sector, right, your corporate partners, as well as the local community-based organizations to really hypercharge the impact that you're having in Brooklyn?
And because we're very focused on Brooklyn, we want to make sure that we, when we make those investments, it's sustainable, it's scalable, and it's impactful. And so the first thing I would say is that Clara, when she was making sort of like this decision, spoke to many leaders not only in Brooklyn, but in New York City to understand the challenges. You need to listen, right? You need to ask questions and not come in thinking you know the answers, right? So that's number one. And number two, once we figured out, okay, economic mobility is definitely an issue, and racial justice is another issue, then who are the partners that we can work with? So I spoke about, the Brooklyn Chamber, True Fund, but we also work with DOE on a number of initiatives. Clara is really focused not only on economic mobility, but also criminal justice reform, reducing the recidivism rate, and also the arts.
And so Gregg is a leader. I should mention this, kind of a sidebar. He's a leader who established a number of initiatives for the city of New York as a commissioner of the Department of Small Business Services. And we often in city government, as I was at SBS, we often use acronyms. SBS, Gregg just mentioned DOE. Can you tell?
Oh my gosh, sorry. I've fallen into the trap. So the Department of Education. Yes. Government is full of acronyms. And so Department of Education, we wanted to work around the peripheral. So two major areas, we work with the Department of Education to fund a program where we funded the curriculum development for art teachers across 70-something schools in Brooklyn. Where those students will learn how to produce products with sort of a social justice angle, and it's sort of a Basquiat sort of a curriculum. But we also recognize that, and when we talk about transforming cities, and the previous panel actually mentioned AI, when you look at, the EDC just put out a report earlier this year, AI is going to change a number of industries. And we have to make sure in terms of the pipeline, and we saw this in some of the programs that we do right now, which we'll talk a little bit later in our accelerator, but we realized that we need to start earlier in developing a pipeline of individuals that understand the language and maybe create a mindset of like starting your own business. So we first started AI Web3 boot camp, working with New York City Technical College and the Department of Education, and Cornell University. So those are the trifecta of partners, and created a Web3 boot camp to explain to high school juniors and seniors, this is the language, this is all the things around Web3, and then we realized quickly that we need to introduce an AI boot camp. So we work closely, literally with a junior at Yale University to put together a curriculum that we tested last summer, and then we're gonna continue again this summer. And this curriculum, and I'm gonna date myself because I was sitting in the classroom and I'm like, large language model, like, oh, this sounds like a lot like when I learned how to code in 1990 something when HTML first came out. Like, this generation has the ability, because AI, no one knows what's happening right now, so it's a great equalizer. Whether you live in Bushwick, Bed-Stuy, Park Slope, whatever, everyone has sort of like the same learning curve. And so if we can put that that information in front of students, then they can pursue that in college, et cetera, et cetera.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And you said a junior at Yale University is helping you.
Well, I mean, because the technology is changing so quickly, right? Academic is, and this is the other thing, like philanthropy can be the sort of the innovative sort of spark that cities need, right? You're not going to get it from government. You're not going to get it from academic institutions because there's so many different. Well, I blame the lawyers, but it's sorry if there's any lawyers in the room. But there's everything.
Comment.
Everyone is so. Oh, you're a lawyer. I forgot about that. Sorry. but you guys are very risk averse, right? And so philanthropy has to be the spark for that innovation. And so that's why, you're not going to find a structured curriculum from an academic institution. What you will find is a young person who's, sort of testing and playing around with the technology. And so, so it's a junior.
Absolutely. That's great. Well, you get some of the best ideas. I think talking about transforming cities, we do need to realize some of the assets we have. And I think that you have done that as well through your work at the Social Justice Fund. It's, it is the human capital and the tremendous assets that are endemic in our youth, right? Their ingenuity, their creativity, their drive, their energy to solve, new ideas and new solutions to old problems. So that's fantastic. So you touched on this a little bit, Gregg, but I want you to take us a little bit deeper into, the transformational impact of the catalytic capital that the Social Justice Fund has provided. Some would look at the number, right? The Social Justice Fund has a commitment of $50 million over 10 years, so starting in 2020 when it was founded, to address some of these structural issues around racial disparities in education, in health, and in wealth, right? $50 million. People in this room might say, that doesn't sound like that much money, right? Talk to us a bit about this notion, this approach of transforming cities through catalytic capital, and particularly the use case of the BKXL Accelerator and also the Accelerate Loan Fund that the Social Justice Fund has put forth.
Yeah, so the loan fund was a perfect example of patient capital, right? Coming in where, and I will tell you that working with the Brooklyn Chamber, the reason why they had the infrastructure was because of government investment. So during the pandemic, New York City gave the chamber a number of grants to sort of like get out to the community. But that $2.5 million still remains in circulation. And so I talked about that. But BKXL, and for those who don't know, when we sort of looked at, okay, we're going to invest in and help Main Street businesses. These are your coffee shops, your cleaners, your childcare providers. These are the businesses that are going to, that actually makes up a city and makes up a community. But we also want to encourage high growth businesses to come to Brooklyn. And so the accelerator was created not only to attract high growth businesses, similar to, for those who remember, back in the early .com days, if you had a business idea, you wanted to be in Palo Alto, right? And so for us, if you were a person of color and you wanted to start a business or grow a business, you want to be in Brooklyn. And why we focus on this particular group, it's because in the VC world, and the numbers are very stark now, but when we created BKXL, only 2% of venture capital dollars went to people of color. If you're a woman, it's 0.5%. And so we wanted to make sure that we created the program that addresses that disparity. So we took a 7% equity stake. We encourage businesses to come in for $125,000, participate in the accelerator. We have 18 companies in our portfolio. We are now, about 6 of them got the follow-on funding. And so the follow-on funding was if they stayed in Brooklyn, if they met other KPIs, they received another $375,000. So that's a total of $500,000 of investment for these companies. And so we're monitoring their progress and looking at to see how that investment is actually helping Brooklyn. And so we're going to produce a report in the next couple, I would say probably next year or so, to talk about like our learnings there. But the other thing we realized is that, okay, we've got loans, we've got equity, but what about grants? What happens if you give a company that's a small business, and I would say like a large small business, a grant to actually help them accelerate? So we came up with a program, and I say we, I shouldn't take credit, like Clara came up with a program called Revitalize Brooklyn. And so in January, we gave 9 businesses and when we do these programs, we actually use data. So we focus on the creative economy because the creative economy was the fastest growing sector in Brooklyn before the pandemic, but it's been the slowest to recover since the pandemic. And so we focused on the creative economy. There's a number of businesses in there, and we zeroed in on fashion and food, except restaurants. And we decided, we decided to invest $50,000 as a grant into these businesses. And so we're following these businesses now. It's been 3 months now in terms of like what happens when you give that sort of like catalytic investment in a business to help them get over to the hump and help them grow. Because what we realize is that when small businesses get the capital that they need, what do? They hire within their community, or we preserve jobs. And that's the main goal for us around economic mobility. But when you talked about catalytic, and sorry, I know that there's other things. Obviously, we are, Clara is a big fan of basketball, right? And so we refurbish basketball courts around Brooklyn. But we refurbish basketball courts through a lens, a social justice lens, in communities that have not had the investments by government, in communities that have high rate of gun violence. And why do we do that? Because we're trying to create an alternative in terms of programming for those communities. And if they have an asset, right, a nice basketball court, then they could have programming like Saturday Night Lights, keep young people off the streets, et cetera. And we refurbished 8 basketball courts in 2 years ago as part of the launch of the initiative. The previous ownership of the Nets refurbished 8 basketball courts in like 10 years. We did 8 in 1 year. And we focus on areas, thank you.
That's definitely worth applause. And while you talk, I'm just going to rub my knees because I'm just feeling as a former basketball player.
But we focus in areas like Brownsville, East New York, Canarsie. We're doing one right now in Bed-Stuy. And what we're trying to do is actually make that investment a catalyst for additional investment. So, for example, in Canarsie, the council person in that area added more money in the budget for a local organization to do more programming on that court. In East New York, the council member, because the community was like, hey, we have this brand new basketball court, what about the other park? The council member in that area finally put together, I think it was like $2 million to add to their budget to refurbish the rest of the park. So for us, that investment of $300,000 for that court was a great investment because it turned into another $2 million investment. So that's what we are focused on in terms of transforming our communities. And we use data specifically to figure out where we're going to make those investments.
That is just awesome. So I know we have about 2 minutes left, and you spoke to...
This time went by so quickly.
It really does. Time flies when you're having fun. So we could go on for hours, Gregg. But you spoke to some of the unique assets that the Social Justice Fund leverages through the wonderful work that Joe and Clara Tsai have established with the Barclays Center, with the Brooklyn Nets, the New York Liberty, basketball court refurbishments. These are ways to really transform, right? This is an approach which is really innovative and transformative, and they also are innovative and transformative in getting a truly innovative and transformative leader to lead the Social Justice Fund in you. And I'm going to say that with all candor and respect, because you are a phenomenal transformative leader. So you're unconventional for the world of philanthropy, to be honest. And you come from a tremendous personal and professional background that has really shaped your perspective on how to do this kind of work. So when you're talking about transforming cities through philanthropy, can you share with us in closing just 3 principles from your personal, your professional life that has been carried forth and would really be the defining footprints of the work at the Social Justice Fund?
So thank you very much for that, and thank you. I think for those who know me know that I'm passionate about the work, simply because, it's about opportunity, right? I grew up in East Flatbush, and there's a number of Gregg Bishops in East Flatbush, in Brownsville, in Canarsie that are just waiting for that opportunity. And so when the lens that I look at, whether it was at Small Business Services or even now, is how do we create opportunity for a person to have that economic mobility, right? So there's opportunity, but there's also, in terms of, working with community, we have to be collaborative. There are organizations like our Just Brooklyn Prize, where we invest $100,000 in 5 individuals, leaders in Brooklyn. There are people, unsung heroes, who are doing the work in their community and who are not recognized. And so we created that program to recognize them and actually to reward them. And so it's about understanding the community and understanding different organizations and how you can collaborate with those communities. And then the last thing I think, it's also about leadership and being bold. I would say that, and I'm going to be controversial a little bit, I know the time is up, but in 2020, a number of organizations made a number of promises. And literally, we are now in a period where, those promises are broken. And I think, for the leadership, for Clara and for Joe, we are still committed to diversity. Diversity is not a bad word, right? If we are a country...
Can you say that again?
Diversity is not a bad word, right? If like history has shown, when you do not have diversity, right? You have the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? Studies have shown, Harvard Business School did a study where if your first 10 employees are not diverse, right, your income, your ability to earn drops by like 30%, right? We should be embracing diversity as a country because we are competing in a global economy, right? And so when we have diversity, we have innovation, right? We have all the great things. And so Joe and Clara understands that and remains committed not only with the Social Justice Fund, but also with the work that we're doing around the teams and BSC Global, et cetera, et cetera. So I just feel like, it's about, the leadership and being bold, especially in tough times. It's easy to sort of say okay, I'm going to support this when everybody's supporting it, right? But it's really, really hard to be standing on the mountain by yourself, but still committed to the work.
Well, let's give a round of applause. I just want to say, Gregg, your leadership is truly inspirational, and I want to thank you for joining us here at Smart City Expo USA. One more time, a round of applause for Gregg.
Thanks for inviting me.